Welcome to Road to Cana, where we focus on marriage readiness for single Catholics.
On the road to Cana, there's gonna be terrain, 'cause a life of love takes time to find the way. On the road to Cana, remember who's the key, 'cause if marriage is to last, it will take three. 'Cause if marriage is to last, if marriage is to last, 'cause if marriage is to last, it will take three. On the road, we'll take three. On the road, we'll take three. On the road, we'll take three. On the road.
We're back again with Father Edward Connolly with me. He is a pastor in the Diocese of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Welcome back, Father.
Thank you, Mr. Buono.
And we're back with Susan Gertz. She is a young single woman who lives in Cincinnati, who I've known for a long time. Welcome back, Susan.
Thank you, Anthony.
We are talking today about the perfect person. Perfect person. Based on the concept that those of you who are single are obviously looking for the perfect person for you in marriage. We have several things to cover on this point. The first question is to you, Father. Is there only one person out there for all of us who are called to marriage?
No, there is not.
Okay,
Just
thank
one.
you for coming. No, I'm just kidding.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Just one person.
No, is there just one person out there? Let me put it this way. You are married, right, Mr. Buono? I know your wife. For you, there is only one person. But prior to your marrying the woman who is your wife, there were many persons. And the same with Susan. In God's plan, we don't know God's plan for her yet, but she may marry someday, maybe she will not. But is there just one man out there now whom God has predestined for? I think that's actually what we're talking about. We're talking about predestination. And we Catholics are not predestinationists, you know. Although many people do think in a predestinationist way. There are many possible marriage partners out there for any one person. And God allows us to choose from among them.
Well, He allows us to choose from among them, and they can be anywhere. There's no specific criteria. There's basically just being led by God accordingly in your life, and being open to the movements of love that might happen in any relationship, and not overanalyzing the concept of, gee, is this the right person for me? Susan, surely you've experienced this in your dating experiences, either for yourself or others who you've been dating.
Well, I think I've been looking for the tall, dark, and handsome brain surgeon who's never sinned, who rides in on a white horse. If that's what I'm looking for, Anthony. No. I think as I have, by grace, grown in my spiritual life, I think that it's more about probably a fiat and being open to the person that the Lord wants to bring into your life, probably when, I'm most ready for that person, or that person's most ready for me. And I don't think that could be just one person. We all have free will, and so we might have chosen one path or another at different times in our lives, and maybe, missed a particular person. But I think if God is really calling us to serve Him in a vocation of marriage, then He's going to provide. And it could be more than, it could be more than one person.
Yeah, but those of us who've gone through the dating process also know that we've been in situations where we thought we had the right person, the perfect person, and especially when it is us who felt so confident about that person, but they are the ones who determined that it wasn't. It's like, you know, I'm sure there's reconciliation that has to be made on that part to yourself, right?
Sure. Oh yeah, and I've experienced that as well. And I guess in that sense, in a spiritual way, I would consider that a test of faith. You know, that God really is going to provide, like I said. I mean, I think what carried me through that situation, when I did feel like I found the person that I was called to marry, and that didn't work out, that I know that if God is truly calling me in my vocation to serve Him, you know, in the marriage vocation, that, you know, He will provide that person.
So we do know that in the dating world today, among single Catholics even, there is this preconception about that there is a one person. There is that tendency. There's also the tendency to think that there is a perfect person, somebody who's perfectly in tune with, well, what should we say? We have a list of things that are requirements, and we try and get that person to meet that. We have a concept of who this person is supposed to be in our lives for us, and round we go. There are all kinds of things that we impose into the dating experience that can block the possible growth into the level of friendship that really tests the viability of God's movement. So Father, let's move into that about the wrong word here is perfect, isn't it? And what do we mean here as we say perfect, as we look at marriage as a covenant?
Yes, if we are called to marriage, we should look for someone who is suitable, appropriate. Those are better words, I think, than perfect. And there are many suitable and appropriate persons out there for all single persons who are, you know, but it's not just one suitable or one appropriate. We have to watch out for thinking that God has our lives all figured out. This is a common mistake that people make. It is true that God knows the future, but it is not true that God determines the future independently of human wills. In other words, part of the wonder of being a human being is that God allows our free wills to interact with His free will. And so many times we say to God, God, what do you want? And God says, well, what do you want? You know, and so let's think about it. And many people aren't comfortable with that level of responsibility for their own lives, and so they simply want to lie back and say, oh God, you do it for me, you know.
Yeah. So you would say it's true then that God actually is, in a way, even though He's leading us, and we need to be led in any possible person that might be out there, towards any possible person, He's actually waiting to bless us in our choice rather than imposing a choice on us. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. I see that in my own pursuit of the priesthood. Not to bore you with my autobiography, but according to Plan A in my life, I was going to enter the seminary when I was 17 years old. That was Plan A. As it actually worked out, I didn't enter the seminary until I was 23. So there were 6 years of ambiguity in my life. And I have to honestly say it wasn't ambiguity as far as my own desire was concerned. It was ambiguity having to do with forces or circumstances beyond my control. And so I was engaged in a little bit of a wrestling match, what you might say, with God or with the church. Finally, at the age of 23, the church says, well, okay, I'll consider your courtship, if you follow me. And so I courted the church. I courted priesthood for 5 years. And I didn't know for sure that I was meant to be a priest until I actually arrived at the day of ordination when the church officially said, we choose you to be a priest. And I said, here I am.
That's beautiful. I think that obviously applies to anyone who's in a dating relationship. They move through relationship, through courtship, and certainly until you're actually married do you really know that this is the one, because it is the decision that determines that. And you are in it. You've made the decision and you're there. But before that, there's always the factors that could make it so that this might not be the right person. But we don't want to be also constantly looking for that. We should, from my observation, there is a lot of overthinking based on high expectations. I like to call them high expectations, because we do all have a list. We have a predetermined idea of who we would like to be married to. Certainly, that is not always the case, that we're meant to marry somebody like that. So we do have to chisel away at this perfectionist concept, right? The perfectionist has to be taken away, and then we have to look towards what? What do you think is the ideal pursuit of making a determination about a person? Susan.
Well, I know that at least I've been surprised when I let someone unfold in front of me and really get to know them. I guess what I would caution is that, and I found in my own life, that upon first glance, judging that book by the cover has always been the wrong thing to do. And I've done it, and I know lots of us have done it, and we have our lists, and we go around and checking them off. And but I think people, they really will surprise you, and so I think what I have learned in my dating experience is to really let that person, especially through friendship, and our culture is so geared towards dating and romance and sexual activity and all of that. But if there's a real chaste friendship, even with romantic overtones, you can really see people unfold. And I've learned a lot about myself that way too. And so I guess there's not, at least for me, any kind of anymore some sort of set criteria. It's more of a, I would hope, an openness. To let that soul unfold in front of me and see where God is leading us.
Well, certainly, the higher your expectations, the more limited your opportunities out there, because the bottom line is nobody's perfect. And certainly everyone has faults, everyone has failures. A big enemy of relationships is when things happen in them that are hurtful, and you make a determination that this is a person that is going to continue hurting me, when really it could just be that they are getting to know you. Really, I mean, you get to know people through the adversities of growing together. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, I know it's the same in marriage as you continue to grow.
I remember something I read, and I remember who wrote it. It was a priest named Romano Guardini. He was well known, at least back in the 60s and 70s. And Father Guardini said something that has stuck with me ever since I was a young man. He said, the church is not only the dearly beloved spouse of the Lord Jesus, she is also the cross on which he is daily crucified. And so if we think about Jesus pursuing his spouse, the church, it was not, let me find a church which will not cause me to suffer, but he pursued the church knowing that the church would cause him to suffer, but in order to save the church. There's a certain element of self-centeredness in all of us whereby we pursue this person. Where is this person who can make me happy? Rather than say, that person out there, I think I could make him or her happy. Perhaps I think we have to take the focus off ourselves.
Absolutely, because the bottom line is we are going to hurt the person who we eventually marry, and there's going to be hurts throughout the development of the relationship, and that's where seeking the imperfect person is really the wise move, because you are not going to marry the Blessed Mother or Saint Joseph. That is a fiction. Really? They're long gone, but always with us, to help us pursue their virtues. But we've got to be forgiving people. I always tell people, you've got to be open to finding someone who is working on themselves always, and who is open to forgiving, and to be forgiven. And that is the building blocks of any marriage. We're going to break for a moment here to listen to our experts on this topic and hear what they have to say.
Now, none of us are saints. everybody watching this program who has gotten married or hopes to get married is going to marry somebody with what we call original sin, with shortcomings. And that is why part of love is carrying other people's burdens, putting up with their shortcomings. Perhaps their physical illness, perhaps their limitations, perhaps their psychological quirks, perhaps their desperate psychological needs. And where marriages go sour is a person does not want to give themselves away, you know, and for sure it'll blow up. It may not end, but it will become a relationship like two mirrors facing each other, which gets you no place.
Well, are people being too desperate today? Are they being too perfectionistic? Probably. Some are. Not all, but some are. You know, looking for the perfect spouse. Well, I think they've seen divorce, and they've seen their friends wounded by the divorce. They don't want divorce. But the other thing, too, is if you're really selfish, you want this perfect spouse, you know? So somebody has to let go of your selfishness, your control. I love the words of St. Paul, bear with one another, you know? Bear with their weaknesses, because together you can work on weaknesses, and you can really overcome weaknesses.
Because they wouldn't do well if they married a saint. A saint might tell them where the cookie crumbled and the crackle crinkled. Saints have a way of being very honest. I was a very good friend for half my life of Mother Teresa. And if you wanted to get the truth, Mother T would tell you the truth. Let me tell you, unvarnished. A lot of people don't want to hear the truth. They're not prepared, they're not up to it, they had a bad week, they haven't heard the truth in their whole life. You know, so as Pontius Pilate said, what is truth? And so many times marriages don't work because the people in them, one or the other or both, have not so much unrealistic expectations, but unhealthy expectations.
Now, Anthony, in talking about this, I have to be fair, and you'll probably get into this at some point, but I think there's thousands of women out there for any one man. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And this may sound unromantic, and if people don't want to agree with me, that's perfectly fine. But the reality is, yes, there is a special one, but there's dozens of special ones. It's just you're not going to have the opportunity to meet the dozens or hundreds of special ones that you could have a relatively happy marriage with. You're probably going to come across who knows how many, one or two or three, and any person can talk about, and as any male who's married over time can look back and see other women that perhaps he wanted to get married with, but that woman wasn't receptive to him.
If you are an observer of the passing scene, like myself, because I'm, along with being a priest, a psychologist, you watch people that are kind of courting. They are absolutely charming, decidedly altruistic, generous, interested. You got to take your time. It's a bit of a show for the fans, even though it may not be insincere. They're sincerely manipulative. And so people have to, I tell people, don't get married till you had a good fight, and then see what happens after it. How you recover from a serious disagreement will tell a whole lot.
And you know, someone said, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, that other people's marriages are always a great mystery. Other people's marriages. And it's true. You see people and say, how in the world did she ever meet him? How in the world are these two people married? And you could go on and on and on. What could he have possibly seen in her? You know, they're different ethnic backgrounds, their height, one's an engineer and the other's English literature, or this one's a waitress and he's a space scientist. And what did he see in her? And that's what chemistry is all about. And I mean, sometimes you see the quote-unquote perfect couple, but generally you don't see the perfect couple. The ones that appear in advertisements or in movies and that are just perfect with one another. The chemistry, and it's a mystery. It's certainly because it has to do with so many different traits, but they fall in love, which has been shown to have physical, chemical effects in the brain. They've done testing on people who fall in love, and it's very, very strong sensation.
Self-giving is extremely important. This is the major thing in a dating relationship you should be looking for. You should be looking for what is the quality of self-giving in this person, and what are their priorities of self-giving. And so from a Catholic perspective, like on your side, probably most of the people give themselves to God, but you want to look for that, because if you can give yourself to God, that's going to strengthen your giving in a marriage. Then you look at in a dating relationship, well, how does this person give himself to me? How is he doing or she doing in terms of self-giving to me? And then how does he or she doing giving himself to their family and to others? It's not enough that they just give themselves to you, because we're called to give not just in a marriage, but more broadly. How does this person, does he do any charitable giving, any kind giving outside the relationship? I think that should be tested and tried, because the more they give, the more loving, the greater their heart, and the greater likelihood they're going to be a wonderful spouse.
How does a woman make herself attractive? By being humanly attractive in her virtues, in her warmth, her affection, in her spirit of fun, by being an interesting person. How do you become an interesting person? You watch good movies, you read good literature, you listen to good music, you appreciate good art. And one of the great virtues of women is their capacity to give of themselves. Well, a woman who is serving others, whether it's the community, whether it's in the church, in the parish, is going to be a woman who's attractive to a male. He's going to see in her, this is a woman who will be a good mother, this is a person who will be a good wife. And obviously, a woman who takes care of herself physically, to the extent that she can, given her own physical and biological makeup, the way she dresses. And of course, in many cases for a woman, just to see a woman who is modest in the healthiest sense of the word. That is, she's woman, she's very feminine, but of course she's not trying to be attractive in a way that is repulsive in some way. That's very attractive sexually, but the same way as it repulses a man, because then his thoughts do not turn in a healthy way towards, this is going to be the mother of my children, but this is a sexual object that I'm approaching.
So we learned there about unhealthy expectations as opposed to high expectations. Because I guess it's good to have high expectations, because after all, we're making a decision that affects the rest of our life, and we want someone who's more than what the typical world is basically either offering us or professing that we should be open to. We're looking for more, especially everyone's seeking somebody who's holy. I think fundamentally they want a holy spouse, what have you. So, but then again, back to is there only one? There are many people out there who are living good Catholic lives, and again, the choices are numerous there. You really do have to hone in, though, on what's unique about one person who you will be attracted to and ultimately make that commitment to. But there are, what we just heard, are unhealthy expectations. What would be considered unhealthy expectations? From your experience, Susan, unhealthy expectations would be, I guess, related to this list that we mentioned before.
Well, sure. I mean, speaking at least to other women, and even, I guess, to some men, having this list of all these objectives where you're not likely to find that person, I just wonder if that just indicates an unreadiness on the part of us as single Catholics who may have that kind of a list, where we're just not ready to approach reality in a sense, because the perfect person, as you said, doesn't exist.
Well, as I've always said to people, you just never know whom God may be helping you be attracted to.
Right.
You never know. So being open and being led is so critical. And Father, the idea of getting to the point of making that contract in marriage, that commitment, that decision, what are we really saying what are we really agreeing to in the marriage contract when we talk about giving ourselves to that person, when it comes to dealing with perfection or imperfection?
Well, when we are deciding who it is that we should marry, and presuming that that other person is deciding also that whether to marry us, go back to the sacred tripod. permanence, fidelity, openness to children. We'll take permanence first. Is our experience of this person that he or she stays the course, is our experience of this person as far as fidelity is concerned that he or she makes us feel secure and doesn't, try to play games with us in regard to other persons. Some men like to show that they are macho men and that they are really attracted to other girls, and so they will very obviously, stare at other women in the presence of their girlfriend or fiance. It's not a very nice thing to do, And try to have dates or social occasions in the company of children. See how your future spouse interacts with children. If you have some married brothers or sisters who have children, try to get your fiance into that orbit and see, are they repelled by children, or do they play with them, or have interchange with them, and ask them very frankly, you want to become a mother? Do you want to be a father? Ask the question directly. Sometimes I think that people date one another and they don't even ask such fundamental questions as that, Do
That's
you want
true.
to?
Absolutely. Questions help you get to the bottom of the person, because it's not about the perfect person. It's about the right person in the context of what direction you're going in. And we're on the direction toward heaven, and we want somebody who is going to be on that path with us. And there are a lot of things that we want in that have to do with personality and fun things and activities and compatibility issues and what have you. But we need to get into our vocation and be with the person who's going to get us to that point in heaven. And when we make that commitment in marriage, we are making a commitment to not hold against the person permanently faults and sins and failures. And that is so important, right? To be able to say, I forgive you, and really forgive and forget. And that needs to be practiced in the relationship.
And not only forgiving things that have happened, but strangely enough, even forgiving things that will happen. Now you say, oh, how can I forgive something that will happen? Well, I'll give you an example. You own a car, do you not, Mr. Buono?
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Father.
Now, honestly, I have no intention whatsoever of smashing the windows in your car or slicing the tires. I really don't plan to do that. But there's the outside possibility that I might. I mean, all things are possible. So what I'd like to ask you now, Mr. Buono, is this. Just in case I do slash your tires and smash your windshields, would you forgive me?
Just in case you do.
Just in case I do. I'd like to know ahead of time. I don't plan to, but human weakness being what it is, you never know.
That's right.
So could you tell me now, will you forgive me if I do that?
Is that what it is in a relationship? Is that what it is in marriage?
You're hesitating.
I don't know. I don't want my
Yeah.
tires slashed.
Yeah.
But I forgive you, Father.
Good answer, good answer. Now, by your telling me that you will forgive me, it's much less likely that I will slash your tires or break your windshield. Strangely enough, now that might not be clear right away. You see, when we enter into covenant with God and we are baptized, God makes an agreement with us that He will forgive us all the sins that we will ever commit. Most of us are baptized as infants, and therefore we have no personal sin at that time. We have the original sin, but we don't have personal sin. But if we live long enough, we will commit personal sin. God guarantees us at baptism that He will forgive us whatever sins we will commit, on condition that we are sorry and that we confess. Much the same thing should happen in a marriage relationship. When you marry someone, you guarantee that you will forgive them whatever offenses they will commit against you in the future. There's a certain peace in that.
Oh, that is ultimately where you want to be when you hit the altar for marriage. That's all the time we have. Thank you for being with me. And go to our website, www.roadtocana.com, get more information and resources and book recommendations and these programs. And remember that when you're on this road, keep trusting in Jesus and keep His peace with you always.
'Cause if marriage is